Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no copay. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you.
Discover a new path to wellness at Arizona Metabolic Health. Dr. Brian Lenzkes offers advanced medicine and personalized care, treating the root causes of your health concerns, not just the symptoms. Whether you're seeking direct primary care, effective diabetes management, or medical weight loss, with a holistic approach, our team is here to guide you every step of the way. Visit ArizonaMetabolicHealth.com today to learn more about our innovative health solutions.
Hey everyone, welcome to 2026. Can you believe it's here already? I'm losing my voice, but besides that, it's going great. And just want to give a shout out to Health Code. Get Health, GETHLTH.com. Great protein shakes, vanilla, and chocolate macadamia. Both are awesome. Great way to reset for the new year. A lot of us may have had some cookies and cakes and different things during the holidays. Now it's time to get back and reset that metabolic clock here. So reach out to Health Code. They're doing some great work. They've been a great sponsor for me. They have berberine there that helps with insulin sensitivity. They're coming out with some new products that I'm really excited about. They have some flavorings. You can go on their website and check them all out, see what flavors you like, that you could add to your vanilla or chocolate to spice it up a little bit so you're not having the same thing all the time. So Happy New Year. Health Code, thank you for all you're doing. And I'm really excited about some of your new products that are coming out. So everyone, please support them. They've been a great support to me. Thank you very much, and happy 2026, everyone. Hello, and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. This episode is going to be short, but not sweet. This has been weighing on me for the last month or so. So I'm just going to come out, and I know this is a controversial topic, but I have to tell you what I'm seeing clinically. We've always been honest of what we're seeing, and kind of we have to figure out a solution to this. And so what I'm getting at is we all kind of just went through this big pandemic, and our only way out was this vaccination, the COVID-19 vaccine. And many of us had trepidation just based on the mechanism of how this thing was going to work. It didn't make sense clinically. A lot of the stuff we saw, it just didn't make sense. And so now we have the ability to check spike protein antibodies. So these are antibodies against the spike protein. Let's take a step back. The vaccine was designed, they said it would stay in the arm, which we now know it biodistributes throughout the body. 81% of us got it, at least one shot. And they said it would stay in the arm and create an immune response. Your body's and the muscle cells would start making these antibodies, the spike protein, which is the outside of that ball that we saw, those little spiky things on there, which is the pathogenic part of the virus. And then our body would make antibodies to start fighting that. And then once it cleared it all, we'd all go on our merry way and we'd be protected from this disease. Early on, we started seeing warning signs. We were seeing myocarditis. I saw multiple cases of blood clots, pulmonary embolism, shingles. In a small practice, this is pretty unusual. So I was seeing things that were very concerning. And I talked to a lot of doctors around the world quietly behind the scenes saying, hey, what are you seeing? And they were seeing the same thing. And so that was a big concern early, acute problems of infection. And then the entire media was telling us it's safe and effective. Trust us. Your doctor's crazy. They're conspiracy theorists and causing vax hesitancy and all this kind of stuff. And none of us wanted to be on that side. We never wanted this to be a political thing. We say, hey, we want to do what's right for our patients. So years later now, I'm seeing patients coming in that are having markedly elevated antibodies against the spike protein with a natural infection, like if you got the flu today. In 2 or 3 weeks, we would see this bell-shaped curve that the antibody levels would go up and then they would return down to baseline because your body knows not to keep making antibodies for something that it's already killed off. But it keeps memory cells there so that when you see it again, it's ready to go. It has all the factories ready to make these antibodies to take it out. So the biggest concern I had early on was like, well, if I already had COVID, is there a benefit to me getting a vaccine? And what we're seeing now, natural immunity is the safest immunity to have, especially when 99.9x of us survive the illness, even with the inflated numbers. And so when we start looking back to say the risk versus benefit, and a lot of us who were against the mandate said you can't really mandate something that could have long-term consequences that we don't know because we haven't studied it yet. And so, unfortunately, it became very political. How to treat it, how not to treat it, whether we wait for our patients to turn blue. And a lot of us stood up, and if you go back and listen to the episodes that we did on Low Carb MD and also Life's Best Medicine, we were questioning these things and saying, "Hey, how can we give a novel treatment or to asymptomatic people where it's not even a treatment? We were trying to prevent illness, and I understand the thought, and all of us thought it was the way out." Now, unfortunately, if you look at data, for instance, smoking, it's about 25 to 30 years of smoking before we start seeing an uptick in cancers and cardiovascular disease and things along those lines, all the negative effects. So you can't say, well, we've been giving this thing for 2 months. There's not going to be a problem. Everything's fine. Subsequent data has shown that the initial data was never released or it was misinterpreted all around the world. And so we were called anti-vaxxers by questioning it. And no one says you're anti-airplane by saying we want to have airplane safety and make sure we follow all the guidelines and rules and that we've tested the planes before we get in and fly it, instead of just flying the planes with no safety testing just to get it out quicker. So a lot of us had reservations about that, myself included. So the honest answer I had to give my patients when they asked long-term consequences was that I don't know, but here are some possible mechanisms. I remember sitting in my office with one of my patients who happens to be an oral surgeon, discussing the possibility of all these things that could happen privately. And we both just met recently, and he said all those things we talked about came true because he's an expert in immunology and understands these things. And he said it doesn't make sense to make the pathogen over and over again, because the concern was, how do you turn this off? How do you stop making the spike protein once you start making it? And it was more theoretical in nature than anything. But now, unfortunately, I'm seeing patients coming in with autoimmune diseases, recurrent infections who have never been sick before, markedly elevated kidney functions. And it turns out when I started checking the spike protein antibodies, they're markedly elevated. There's also another test we can run called a nucleocapsid antibody. And that tells us if you ever had the infection. So I have at least 3 patients in my practice who were diagnosed with long COVID, but they never had COVID in the first place. It's not a long COVID. It's markedly elevated spike proteins, which makes you basically, it's like you're fighting the flu all the time. You're fighting the infection chronically. And the problem with that is if your entire immune system is looking for this one infection, it forgets about everything else, like cancers and like other diseases that we want to fight off. We're seeing a huge uptick in prion disease, which is mad cow disease that we haven't seen since the 80s. And so I'm not saying these things to scare people. I'm saying, gosh, if you're struggling with brain fog, fatigue, a lot of joint pains, cognitive decline, being sick all the time, it may be worth getting your antibodies checked. It's just a spike protein antibody. It's definitive. It will tell you whether you have ongoing production of spike protein, because ultimately those antibodies from the spike protein that the spike protein are initiating should go away once you get rid of the spike protein. The concern is, and there was a lot of data from Dr. McKernan was the first one to talk about having DNA in the vaccines that could possibly intercalate or go into your DNA and cause you to keep making these spike proteins. He was subsequently exonerate. They went through and tried to trash the guy, and he's been fighting this all along. Hopefully, I can get him on to interview. But his data was replicated multiple times in all kinds of people, research labs who never even knew him. So he's been kind of fighting that fight, saying, gosh, we got a problem, we have to evaluate this. And I have a lot of friends who are now suffering, family members. I've lost family members now. I lost 0 family members to the to COVID, and I've lost multiple family members, and one is on hospice now. We always say that um, uh, just because they're associated doesn't mean causality, right? It doesn't mean that it caused it. And I'm not saying it did. I'm just saying we are seeing an uptick in these things, and it's very noticeable. And we can't deny it. We have to look at it and say, okay, if I do have it, what can I do? 3 patients today. This is why I'm making this podcast. I had 3 patients I had to call who all of a sudden now are in worsening kidney function. Their kidney tests are getting, and they have no other risk factors. They're not having high blood pressure. They're not on any meds that can cause this. And we looked at every other option. Each one of them has come back positive spike protein, even though they haven't had a vaccine since 2021, 2022 at the latest, and no recent COVID infections. With markedly elevated spike protein antibodies above 25,000, which is the maximal ceiling that we can detect. So there are treatments out there, natural treatments that we can do, and we're going to initiate it. I already have several patients that we're doing natural treatments with, but it's hard to say because if it says above 25,000 and say you're at 80,000 now, and in 2 months it's at 30,000, I still can't do the upper limit is 25,000. And I've seen enough people with markedly elevated levels that we really, in a large scale, have to look at this. And so I'm going to be making phone calls tonight to some friends and see if they'll do some research and figure this out. Because, and again, I don't check the antibodies on everyone, just symptomatic people. But if this is happening in asymptomatic people, some lab abnormalities we'd see is the worsening kidney function, markedly elevated inflammatory markers like CRP is one of them. And there is some data that fasting may help being metabolically healthy. And this is why it's so important. And I'll tell you just from my early experience, I had a group of females that I was following that were doing a low carb ketogenic diet. And I know what the lab should look like because I've been doing this for long enough. And the labs were all improving. It was a 16-week program. The last week, several of the patients had markedly elevated inflammatory markers, elevated insulin, and it's not typical unless they're going through major stress, not sleeping, they're sick, they have a COVID or they're sick or something's going on. And when I called the owner of the company, I said, hey, out of the 23, 20 are perfect labs, 3 of them have crazy labs. And the 3 that I said, can you look into it, see if they're drinking or if they're stressed or they're eating cookies all day? And I don't know it, but I had a continuous glucose monitor on all of them. So I knew they weren't eating cookies. And she called me back. So actually it was 6 out of the 23. So 17 had normal labs, 6 had abnormal labs. She called me back. She goes, Doc, you're not going to believe this, but all 6 of them had the vaccine in the last month. And this is early on, right? And I said, wow, that's kind of crazy. The other ones did it? No, they didn't have it yet. So that was a concern because markedly elevated C-reactive protein is highly correlated with cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and strokes. So if one of these women would have had a heart attack or a stroke or a blood clot, and they said, did you do anything different? Oh, yeah, I was doing a low-carb diet and I started eating real food, and that's what caused this. Fortunately, none of them had an issue. But when we're talking about metabolic health, this is what we're talking about. Chronic inflammation is an issue. So if you're chronically making a spike protein, that is going to be a huge issue. So I think it's worthwhile as a public service, just ask your doctor, say, hey, can you just check my spike protein antibodies and see where they're at? I'm just curious. And then while you do that, check the nucleocapsid antibodies, which tells us if you ever had the infection or not. A lot of people who think they had it didn't have it. Why? Because the PCR test we were using was faulty, and there's tons of false positives. So a lot of people who thought they had COVID previously never actually had it when we look at the nucleocapsid antibodies. And a lot of people who thought they never had COVID actually did have COVID at one point. But I have not seen yet in my practice anyone with markedly elevated spike protein who wasn't vaccinated. And that's a concern for me. correlation is not causation. I get that for sure, but it's something we have to look at. And I think if your kidney tests are getting worse, you're feeling terrible, you're noticing mom's not remembering things, I think it's worthwhile looking at. And I'll tell you, as a doctor practicing for over 20 years, my mom declined very quickly after her booster, and I've never seen anyone decline like that mentally, physically, emotionally, everything. And so it stood out. It always bothered me. And then the more people I've talked to, this was not unique. There was a lot of people who had this sudden decline in mental status and dementia or Parkinson's or neurologic disorders. So again, I'm not saying it's causality. I'm just saying it's something we need to look at. This is what we call a hypothesis when we say, hey, I'm seeing this. It seems kind of weird. Should we look into it more or do we ignore it? And I think in medicine right now, we're ignoring it. And part of the problem is a lot of doctors recommended this without really thinking about it, without really seeing where the possible long-term consequences. And that's why, I was a big believer in cutting back on mandates, because you can't force someone to do something that may have detrimental, that you could die from, or you can have long-term consequences. We didn't know that. And at the point time, I could have been wrong, and we could have said, yeah, it turned out everything was fine. Don't worry about it. And in which case I would have been a lot happier than having to say, gosh, maybe we all jumped in the wrong barrel. We panicked and didn't think about the long-term consequences. So I will say it's worthwhile just getting checked, and I don't want to scare people. That's not why I'm making this podcast. I just want to bring awareness. And you could talk to your physician or nurse practitioner, whoever's taking care of you, and just, hey, can I get that checked? I'd be kind of curious. I have no commission. I have no financial interest in any of this stuff. The products I'm using right now, I have no financial interest or even know the people. But I am seeing benefit clinically where people who have severe shortness of breath on exertion, fatigue, and mental fog are starting to get better. So that's very rewarding. The question and concern I have is, okay, and I have a call out to a couple of people who you will know, who I've had on the podcast already. If I keep making the spike protein, and the other big issue is this. So say my pancreas starts making the spike protein. It happens to be the cell that takes it up. And my body starts attacking my pancreas. Now I have type 1 diabetes. I have at least 5 documented cases in my practice of women over the age of 65 who get type 1 diabetes. Unheard of. And when I saw it, I said, this is weird. I made a comment about it online. And then about 3 weeks later, a big study came out saying, yes, you get autoimmune attack on the pancreas and get type 1 diabetes. And that's very atypical for someone that age with normal weight, normal exercise, normal everything to get this. So that's my concern when we start seeing things out of the blue that just don't make sense. I mean, those of us on the front lines aren't taking serious enough, because they'll say, where are your publications? But our job is observation, and to say, gosh, here's what I'm seeing, and this could be a big concern. It may have nothing to do with it. There may be another factor that we just don't know about yet, but my instincts are telling me that there's something here, and it's something we need to address. So the big concern is, okay, if it did last longer for some people, how do we get rid of it? If you keep making it and I keep cleaning it, who wins? Can I clean it fast enough to make a clinical difference? That's what we're hoping and praying about, is that we can diminish this. There's some new treatments going on in Japan. Around the world, they're really starting to look at it, even though it's not politically correct. It's something we have to look at and say, what do we do now? That we can't deny the problem if it's there, or rule it out and say that's not the case. There's something else causing it. But I'll tell you, in my practice right now, when I see something unusual, whenever I check it, it's been close to 100% that it's markedly elevated spike proteins in the few people that I've checked over time, because this test has been relatively new. I didn't even know it existed till some great doctors out there started talking about it. I'm like, well, I'll start checking it. And now I wish I didn't check, but also I'm glad we're checking, because at least we say, hey, we could do something about it. We have some options out there. There's some things called nattokinase and N-acetylcysteine and combinations thereof, curcumin. There's different things we can do. And so my intent is not to scare you. I'm just saying, look, I'm seeing this clinically, and in my small practice with having patients, like having these things, like in my tiny practice that I have now, I'm out of my 2,000 patient practice. It's a red flag and a big concern. So I will be having some experts come on in the next couple of months, and we'll have this discussion, and hopefully we come to some good answers. We get some great treatment options. Maybe it's something else causing these problems, but in the least, just so you know, it'd be good to get your spike protein antibodies checked and just see where they're at and say, okay, they're fine, they're good. And feel free to reach out because I'd love to hear more data from more people. I think we need more data to explain this, but it's going to be a long path, and unfortunately, people are really focusing on health. We're making so we're going back and looking at science that we were told was settled, which wasn't. And so hopefully we have some good people in charge that are looking into these things and are going to figure it out. So sorry about the heavy first episode of this year, but I think it's critically important. I think it's, I'm just making observation. I want to make people aware of that, and we'll see. I'll do a follow up, and I'll say I was wrong. If it turns out that way. But I think we're going to have a lot of data, a lot of information coming in. So I'm going to take a breath now. I didn't want to make this episode. I really didn't, but I think it's important. I'd love to talk to experts about it. Anyone out there who has information, like what do we do? What's our best approach? Is a spike protein test flawed? Is that possible? Maybe. But the fact I'm seeing, and I knew what I was going to see after the first couple cases, and then I was like, it's going to happen again, and just did. Yeah, I just got off the phone with someone, and so be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We'll get through this. We'll figure it all out. 2026 is going to be a great year, and we're going to make some great medical advances, and we're going to clean up the system. All right. God bless. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.